Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. And in this video, as I discussed in my previous video in the plan of attack, that our next topic will be natural language processing basics. So in this video, I just want to get you guys familiar with all the theoretical concepts that are involved in natural language processing, so that before we begin with implementing all of the concepts and functions in Python, I just need to get you familiar with the theoretical part of natural language processing. So let's get started. So just to make this video a little bit easier to understand for you guys, I've decided a plan of attack for this video as well. So we'll be having a plan of attack for every single video before we begin. Okay. So the first thing that we'll be discussing will be, why do we really need to understand natural language processing, and why is it so important as a data scientist or as a machine learning engineer? Why is it so important for us to learn NLP, and where it could be applied? Okay. And then we'll be understanding what is linguistics, and what is the relationship between linguistics and natural language processing. Then we'll be understanding the language syntax and semantics, which are actually a subpart or an area of study in linguistics, and why do we really understand the syntax and semantics in natural language processing. And the last thing in this video will be the sentences in terms of parts of speech. Um, there's one way of representing a sentence and breaking it down into individual words, and how do we do that in terms of parts of speech. So we'll be understanding the grammatical part of all of this. Okay, so let's begin. So why NLP? Um, in past, you might have heard of these three V's, which are called the volume, variety, and velocity, which represents that any data which has volume, which means it's in large quantity, um, or it is in variety, which means the data has distinguished classes. It's a very big data set. It's coming from various sources. And then we have velocity, which means how quickly a data is being generated. So any data that has these three characteristics in it, or these three V's in it, is supposed to be a big data. And so if you think of text is also considered a big data. Why? Because if you take a look at the text in the current scenario, in the time that we're living in, the textual data is everywhere. It's being generated every single second, every single minute, from server farms, from different sources. So some of the sources that I mentioned here are, for example, we have social media, which is one of the biggest sources of text. People write blogs, post articles every single day on social media, such as Twitter, Facebook, and places like this. And we have news, which also has such as newspapers, which have a lot of textual data generated every single day. And then we have blogs, messages, communications across organizations. Organizations have their own ERP systems where where the employees communicate with each other, and that's also a text, right? And then we have wikis, we have books, we have articles, we have research papers, and the list continues. So I was only able to gather some of the examples for you guys, but you guys can obviously think of some better examples than me, and where the text is being generated every single second, or which at least has these three V's. Okay, so considering this scenario, this is exactly what's the essence of natural language processing and learning the natural language processing in the first place. If you want to so as a machine learning engineer, you in future you might end up on a case, or you might have already came across a case or a project where you want to you have a data set which has natural language in it, and you need to process it. And that is exactly where natural language processing comes in. So, and natural language processing has these tools and techniques that you can use to process natural language, and convert an unstructured textual data into a structured or understandable a form of data which you can feed it into your machine learning model. Okay, let's move on. So you might have heard about this term, text mining. What is text mining? Text mining is basically one way of mining text, which is actually a subfield of data mining. But what we do in text mining is we actually mine text. We apply tools and techniques just to extract the text out of a data set, or simply understand or process text, right? So the areas of text mining include information extraction. Data mining is not the sub area or sub part of text mining. In fact, it's a total opposite. Data mining is a larger field, and text mining is a part of data mining. But what I mean to say here is that we will be using some of the techniques involved in data mining to actually perform mining on text, and have information retrieval. And then finally, we have the natural language processing. Natural language processing is what we need to study in this video, but that doesn't really mean that our series will be focusing on just on natural language processing. We want to move to text analytics, which is a bigger part. But before we move on to text analytics, we need to understand what natural language processing is before we can actually analyze the text, because the techniques and tools that we'll be using are again a part of natural language processing. So let's begin. So just to make this clear for you, think of computer science, artificial intelligence, NLP. Where does NLP fall in? So I've created this little Venn diagram that says that let's suppose we have a very big field, which is computer science. Computer science is a very big, very big discipline, and artificial intelligence is a subfield of computer science. And then we have NLP that has some specialization in computer science and artificial intelligence. And then we have linguistics, which is right in the middle of NLP, which means that linguistics is not totally a part of NLP. Some of the parts of linguistics are being used in natural language processing, and then there are other techniques which are more computational that need to be studied in order to implement them, and they have to do more with the programming side. So speaking of linguistics, what is linguistics, and what's the relationship between linguistics and natural language processing? Think of these areas of study such as phonetics, stylistics. There are a lot of areas of study of linguistics, and in simple words, linguistics is a scientific study of language. So the scientific study of language, linguistics depicts that we need to study language in terms of its culture, in terms of the fact that where it is originated from. So there are a lot of things that we can study from a language or obtain from a language. But for us people, for us machine learning engineers and data scientists, we just need to understand two areas of study, or we just need to learn two areas of study of linguistics just to understand natural language processing, and they are syntax and semantics. So we will be studying both of them one by one. So the first thing that we need to study is syntax. What is syntax? Syntax is the rules and conventions that form a language. Think of a language that you speak and every single day, and think of the language that I'm speaking right now. I'm speaking English. You might be speaking Urdu, or you might be speaking Hindi. You might be speaking Chinese, Japanese, and every single language that you speak. Every single language depicts a particular syntax. It's written and spoken in a particular syntax, and that is exactly what creates a meaningful language for you to understand, for your ears and for your eyes to understand. Okay, so, and speaking of the meaning, semantics is exactly the next part of syntax. So you have a sentence, you have written a sentence in following a particular syntax. Now what do? You use semantics to understand its meaning. What does it really mean? And now let's move on to a much more greater detail, which is syntax. What is syntax? Think of this collection of words where I've mentioned these individual words. So by looking at these words, you might understand, you might tell what each and every single individual word means, but you cannot tell what these words have to do with each other because there's no syntax being followed. They're just scrambled up in a whole box. How do you relate them with each other? And this is exactly where syntax comes in. So let's try to actually put them all together in a syntax and see what we get. So the first thing that we need to understand is words. So remember I told you that we will be also discussing the parts of a speech. This is where it begins. Words are the most smallest part of a sentence, and each and every single word could be of any type. And I've discussed those types in great detail here. Think of the first word, which is a noun. Think of a word could be a noun. For example, a word could be a living or non-living entity. A word could be a verb, which means it's representing an action or a state or occurrences of something, which means an action is taking place. And then we have an adjective, which simply describes a noun. Think of an adjective such as think of a noun such as think of a noun such as think of a noun such as you are thinking of a person, and then you have person, which is okay. So think of adjective as let's say a car is moving very quickly, and that you want to define so the car is a noun, right? And the quickly word is defining the car which is moving very quickly, and that is exactly what adjective is. Similarly, we have adverbs, which simply are used as a modifier with any of the above, such as adjective, verb, noun, and then we have a determiner. A word could be a determiner, which means it depicts an article like an, the, etc. Okay, so and then if you form the words together, you get what are called the phrases. Phrases are also of there are a total of 4 or 5 phrases. So the first phrase we have is the noun phrase, which simply has which simply acts as a subject or object to verbs. So think of this example such as the brown fox jumps. So the brown fox is actually a noun phrase, and the jumps is the word is a verb, right? Which means it's an action which is jumping, right? So the noun phrase is simply acting. So you can see that brown fox is acting as a subject to the word jump, right? And then we have another phrase which is verb phrase. So where the verb acts as a head word, and which means such as the boy has started the classes, which depicts that the has started is an action which is actually being used as the head word. And this is exactly what forms the meaning of what forms a syntax, or simply the way of representing a sentence, right? And then we have adjective phrase, which has adjective as a head word. think of um think of the example that I discussed earlier for the adjective, and this is exactly what it is. So you can see that the car is moving quickly, or the car moves quickly, has quickly as the head word. And then you have adverb phrase such as adverbs which means adverbs are used as a head word. So think of an example such as she's going to be here very soon. So the very soon is actually just adding an essence to the girl getting to a particular place very quickly or very soon. So it represents the essence or the importance of the sentence. So you can kind of get the idea here. And then we have the prepositional phrase such as he climbs up on the hill. So we could have used just a sentence such as he climbs on the hill, but from that you might not have understood what exactly is happening exactly. So in order to clarify an action, you use words such as up, down, which actually makes things clearer to you as in a sentence. Okay, and then when you combine phrases together, you get what are called the clauses. And there are many types of clauses. The first type is the declarative clause, which means it carries a neutral tone. Example of words such as the sky is blue. So it doesn't actually describe any question. It doesn't give you any rules of instruction. It's just something that you just hear and understand. It's just information. Such as the sky is blue, right? And then you can think of any other example. Okay, such as the lemon is yellow, or any other example like that. And then we have imperative clauses, which have things which carry instruction to be followed. So let's say I'm telling you to do something. I'm telling you to listen to me. That's an instruction. So I've given an example here, such as please maintain silence, which depicts that you want to maintain silence. You have to maintain silence. You have to follow this instruction, and that is what imperative clause is. Then we have relative clauses, which means which have words dependent upon another word or a previous phrase. Think of this word, which is John said he needs to talk. So the sentence he needs to talk is a part of the sentence, but it cannot be understood without John said. Because if I just tell you he needs to talk, you will ask me who needs to talk, and this is exactly why it's dependent upon the phrase or words such as John said. And this is what relative clauses are, which which means one phrase or word might have a relationship with another phrase or word. Okay, and then we have interrogative phrases, which represents a question, such as do you need a treatment, which, or you can think of any other question. And then we have exclamative clauses, which represents a shocking or surprising statement, such as what a great experience, or you can think of any other surprising or shocking experience that you might have and you want to represent in a form of text, right? And then, okay, so now you know what words are, phrases are, clauses are, but how do we put them together? And this is exactly where the syntax comes in. So how do we put these parts of speeches together to form a sentence? Consider a sentence. A sentence is made up of two or more clauses, or they could just contain one clause. A sentence could have one or more clauses, and then each and every single clause could have one or more phrases, and then these phrases are combined together with the help of a conjunction, such as and, or, but, etc. And then we have, for each and every phrase and a conjunction, we have a word. So this is exactly the formation. This is how you format um, a whole sentence in terms of parts of speech. And then remember the example I discussed with you earlier, and I showed this box to you. How do we form this in the similar syntax? Well, let's put these things together. Okay, so Jack was sleeping, which are just the words, and then we have a conjunction which is and then we have dog was playing. So that's how you form the sentences. Now, now you know how you can actually go ahead and break them. But how do you know that which word is a noun or a verb, or that which phrase is a noun phrase or a verb phrase or any other phrase that we have studied earlier, and then combine together what types of clauses are being used. So for that, you can kind of say that you can kind of see there here is that so the clauses that I use in this particular example are the declarative clauses. Since this is just a rule, this is just an information. Jack was sleeping. It doesn't have any question. It is not an interrogative clause, which means it doesn't have any question. It is not it is not any exclamative clause, which means it's not a shocking thing. And then we have inside the declarative clauses we have the phrases such as the noun phrase and the verb phrase. Each noun phrase has a noun, Jack. So the noun phrase has a noun, Jack, and then we have a verb phrase verb phrase which has a helping verb, was, and then we have a verb, sleeping, and then we have a word, and, which is a conjunction. It's not a part of any clause, and then it's combining and then it's joining the other clause with the previous clause, and that's how you form a sentence. So now you know what syntax is. Let's move on to semantics. What is semantics? Um, as I mentioned earlier, the meaning, the basic definition of semantics is the study of meaning. But how do you understand? How do you study a meaning? Well, consider a word tier. What do you get from this word? If I ask you what does this what does this word really mean? You could think of a tear could be um an eye drop that is being shed from a human eye, or a tear could be simply tearing a paper or tearing something. So how do you get it? And see, as soon as I showed a picture to you, you were able to get it very easily, because a picture represents something very well. It represents the meaning of something, and that is exactly why semantics uses signs, symbols, facial expressions, body language to make things easier and and much more easier to understand for you. So if I'm just speaking to you, and if I'm not making these facial expressions with you, you might not understand me very well. So if I'm just teaching you, I'm not showing these slides to you, you might not understand me very well in terms of what I'm teaching to you. So representing something in the form of pictures or in the form of symbols, facial expressions using body language makes things much more easier to understand. Okay. In other words, I can say that semantics can understand in a way that the knowledge is being transferred with a message that is being conveyed to you to help understand its meaning. Such as right now, whatever I'm speaking to you, I'm also showing my slides or myself to you, just to make myself much more clear or much more understandable for you guys. So this is exactly what semantics is. Okay. So now, what is one type of semantics is the lexical semantics, which represents a relationship of one word or a phrase with other words, or simply the association of one word with another word. Think of a word fish, and think of a word animal: marine, shark, eel, piranha, shoal, tuna, ocean, water, sea. And fish might live in a water. Fish might be a tuna fish, or fish might live in a marine. So you can see that each and every single word has a different meaning, and the way they're associated with each other it has a completely different story of how a particular word might be associated with a particular sentence, or another word. So a fish might be an animal, fish might be a shark, fish might be an eel, fish might be a piranha or a shoal. So there are numerous ways how you can associate a word with each other. But what are the building blocks of semantics, by the anyways? So think of let's just discuss the building blocks of semantics one by one. Think the first building block that I can think of is the entity. So an entity is a dog or cat. Think of an example such as dog or cat, and then we have some relationship with the concept. So what is a concept? This is the second building block of semantics. So a concept is, in general, is a category, is a class. How you define a particular word, or which class or category does a particular word or entity falls in, and how do you relate the entity with the concept? That is where the third building block comes in of semantics, which is a relationship. So there are entities, and you want to form some sort of relationship of the entities with their concepts, and then think of dog and cat and the relationship with the words animal, mammal, and pet. So dog or cats could be an animal, a mammal, or a pet. So they have some sort of relationship between them. And the third building block, which is the predicate of semantics, is predicate. But in order to understand predicates, think of rules, such as I've defined this rule: cat is an animal. Which means that I'm just giving this universal rules that the cat is an animal. So if you see any cat, you can classify it as an animal. You can just use the concept as animal. And then we can actually represent this cat in the form of a symbol such as animal, cat, which is just a one way of representing this. I've used my term. You can use any way you can represent this. What the general idea behind the rules is that you form the rules just to understand or depict the meaning of a sentence in a much more broader way. So if you already have a rule, you're likely able to understand or break the sentence in a much more clear or understandable parts, right? And let's just move a little bit one step ahead of this and represent this in the form of a mathematical or what we call the first order logic. And this is the first thing that you have came across, which is one study of representing sentences in the form of logic or rules. And as you can see that what I've used here are the quantifiers. So if you haven't understand if you don't know quantifiers, you can actually check out, you can actually search for the quantifiers. There's a list of symbols that represent a particular meaning. But for now, what I can explain from here, from this sentence, is that you can see the this symbol right here, which looks like a flipped A. It represents the word for all, and it says that for all entities X, such as the entity X, which is a cat, the X entity is an animal. So what we are trying to say is that all cats are animals. So you can kind of get, that's one way of understanding this, right? And this is one way of understanding the first order logic. And we'll be discussing all these things in a much more greater detail, and we'll be discussing more techniques when we'll be discussing the topic semantic and sentiment analysis, which is, by the way, a part of our plan of attack, which I discussed in the previous video. And we'll be discussing that when we will be implementing all of this in Python, right? So for now, all you needed, all what you needed to know, I have discussed this in the video. And for the next video, we'll be getting started with the natural language toolkit, which is a library in Python, and we'll be implementing all the functions that we have learned just now, and all the things that we will be learning in our next video in Python. So we will be getting started with Python. I hope you are excited. You are as excited as I am. So without any further ado, let's get started with the second part. Um, Again, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do that, because if you want to stay tuned with this course and you really like this course, don't forget to like. And if you have some questions, don't forget to comment down below. I'll make sure to reply to you. Okay? Bye.